Okay, I don't think I can have the headphones in. Is that better, guys? I'm hoping that's better. Okay, great. Yay! Okay, so why don't I just go back and repeat everything I just said, since apparently you guys couldn't hear it. I'm Danielle Scruton, and this is the second webinar session for Parents, Children, and Miracles. And I was just saying that last week Susan Dugan joined me, and we went over some really helpful tips about parenting through the lens of A Course in Miracles. And looks like people are joining slowly. So this session, we're going to focus on applying what we learned last week, and we had gone over the steps to forgiveness. So I'm going to just go over those again in case anyone missed it last week. These were set out by Ken Wapnick, who is the author of the book that we're basing this series on. Parents and Children, Our Most Difficult Classroom. So the forgiveness process is step one. I'm not upset, angry, anxious, frantic, depressed, hopeless, terrified. Insert your word there, for the reason I think, and that comes from the workbook. So if you're willing to recognize that whatever it is that's triggering you in that moment, that it's possible that you're not upset for the reason that you think, that shift is everything. And as Susan was explaining last week, it leads very gently into the next step, which is I get to peace instead of this. So if you're not upset for the reason that you think, so if what is triggering you is not truly what's triggering you, then perhaps it's possible to see peace instead of this. And then the third step would be recognizing, again, that we're not alone, that we have this gentle inner teacher of kindness who can help us see it differently. And so taking that breath, taking that moment, and actually asking for help. Please help me to see this differently. And this is the result of the first two steps. And that is done by the Holy Spirit. And Margaret's saying that was huge for her. And I just want to say that anyone who would like to join in, this is kind of this is the week to do it. This is the free for all. So if you want, you can raise your hand and join the room, and we'll talk one-on-one. But please, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, go ahead and type in the chat and let me know what your experience was like with your children, with your parents, whomever you applied it to. This is about special relationships. And as we said last week, the longest running special relationships tend to be the parenting. And so they're a great classroom, a great playground for the forgiveness work. Okay. So Margaret's raised her hand. I'm going to try and get you in the room, Margaret. Sorry, guys. Okay. So Margaret, I've invited you to speak into the room, so you should be able to speak shortly. And just as we're waiting for that, for Margaret to join us, I will say I'll share my own experience. This past weekend was very difficult, and yet wonderful in that I was able to look at some of the things that I haven't been able to look at previously. And so every other weekend, my boyfriend's daughter comes to stay with us. So I have two kids. My daughter's 10 and my son is 7, and my boyfriend's daughter is 8. So the three of them are very close in age, and their needs are very similar. And but it's quite the disruption. Disruption is probably not the right word, but it is. I know that it's difficult for my daughter. My daughter tends to. She loves her. She loves my boyfriend's daughter, and they get along really well. They share a room when she's here. But I know my daughter also feels that that it's that my boyfriend's daughter is perhaps better behaved, or that there's a shift, you know, that now there's another person vying for my attention, and it's her behavior definitely changes, and so it's a lesson for me to be able to, again, I'm not upset for the reason I think, and because I just want, whenever she's getting upset, I want to get defensive and defend myself, and we never go anywhere when that happens. Um, so this weekend I was able to, using those forgiveness steps, really try and be present there for her, and not pay so much attention to the behavior, but to the call for love behind the behavior. So Margaret, I'm not sure if you're having issues getting into the room, but I'm trying my best here. I've just invited you as an attendee. So if it's not working, perhaps you can just type out what you'd like to share with us about your experience last week, and anyone else who had some experiences last week, even if it didn't work out for you. Margaret's saying she got a new computer and she can't figure it out. So if you want, just go ahead and type it out, and we'll do it that way if that works. So as I was saying, it's funny because, you know, the kids get along really well, considering that they both they all come from divorce, and they have different things that they like to play. They have different interests. You know, my daughter's 10 and my boyfriend's daughter's 8, so that is quite a difference, but they do tend to get along really well. And but I do notice this, that now that there's another female child vying for my attention, and my daughter tends to get jealous, or assume that, you know, I'm giving her more attention than I give to my daughter, or things like that. So it's always interesting, but it's also just a great opportunity to see that things can be done with love. That by turning to my inner teacher, I can see it all very differently. I can see it with compassion, instead of feeling guilty for putting my kids through this, for them having to be in the situation to begin with. I can see that that it's all beautifully laid out, and that we'll get through it, and that, you know, the same inner kindness teacher that is within me, the same Holy Spirit that is within me is within her. And so by demonstrating it, it's like I call it out for her, and it becomes like a language that goes unspoken, that we both can understand, and she can see that I understand, that we're not attacking each other, that I'm not getting defensive and trying to, you know, keep this problem to myself, or, you know, keep this problem real, really. But we want to transcend what appears to be happening. So Margaret's just replied here, and she says, I have a 12-year-old who is very sensitive. He also has ADHD. We are in the middle of packing to move, so there's a lot of upheaval going on. Oh, definitely. Throughout the week, when I reminded myself of the steps, we talked about my lack of reaction or softer approach with love and understanding. Made things go so much smoother. Oh, that's wonderful. That's interesting. Your lack of reaction. So I'm guessing that meant, you know, previous to this, you were perhaps defensive, but to come at it with love and understanding, that's everything. And it is a softer approach. And this work is very gentle. You know, we were talking about that last week. Thank you so much for sharing, Margaret. If you have more to say, please absolutely share. But we were talking last week about how gentle the miracle is. You know, it's not necessarily these big epiphanies. It comes on very slowly and gently a lot of the time. And Margaret's saying, lost my temper a bit more than I should. So do you mean previous to this, that you lost your temper a bit more than you should, or last week? Um, you know, I have a problem with should because I feel like it comes from I feel like there's a lot of shame associated with should. And she's saying previous to this, yes, she lost her temper more than she should have. But I feel like there's a lot of shame attached to that because it's like a line that we draw in the sand, and we're not allowed to cross it. And if we cross it, that's it. We're guilty. And we should feel ashamed. I feel, you know, that Jesus wouldn't have us draw that line in the sand. That He is always guiding us to be gentle with ourselves, knowing that whatever appears to go on out here is not really happening, and that you can't judge yourself based on what's going on out here. In fact, we're called not to judge at all. But as parents, it's so difficult, isn't it? Because you just feel like you should never lose your temper. You should always know what to do, and that whenever you don't, it's this most out of control feeling because these little people you're responsible for them. But this goes back to what I wanted to review anyways, which is the overriding message of this book of Ken Wapnick's and this series that we're doing, which is I am not responsible for my child or my parents' choices. I am responsible for my reactions, as Margaret was saying and talking about, and which teacher I choose to look at them with right now. So Margaret, she's now saying, our discussion of forgiveness last week helped my husband and I to move past the way we have dealt with things, remembering that we have a partner, that we are human, and that we need to forgive ourselves. Oh, beautiful. Yes, yeah, we do need to forgive ourselves. It's all forgiveness is self-forgiveness in the end, because there's only one mind. So we're doing this work for each other. I mean, you know, I love that quote from Ram Dass. We're all just walking each other home. You know, when I do this for myself, I do it for you. So that's beautiful. Deborah says practicing the steps helps undo habitual habits. Ooh, that's a good one. Yes, absolutely. It takes practice. It does take practice. It's because you're shifting your way of thinking. It's a new way of being. So again, I just want to invite anyone who would like to actually come on the screen with me and discuss face to face. Absolutely, you can do that now. You just raise your hand, do a little finger you click on, and then I'll invite you into the room. So I wanted to talk a little bit about forgiveness, and there's a part in the actual book. Sorry about that. Ken's book here, where he talks about forgiveness, and it's in the afterword. And I wondered if I could read a little bit about that, and then I'm hoping we can discuss more about those forgiveness steps and how those were applied in your week this past week. So if you guys have the book, it's actually in the afterword, and it's on page 78, and it talks about the Holy Spirit's right-minded thought of forgiveness and what it brings about. So this is actually from the Course. Sin or guilt is a block, set like a heavy gate, locked and without a key across the road to peace. The body's eyes behold it, a solid granite, so thick it would be madness to attempt to pass it. Yet reason sees through it easily, because it is an error. Reason will tell you that the form of error is not what makes it a mistake. The body's eyes see only form. They cannot see beyond what they were made to see, unable to look beyond the granite block of sin and stopping at the outside form of nothing. Yet how can sight that stops at nothingness, as if it were a solid wall, see truly? It is held back by form, having been made to guarantee that nothing else but form will be perceived. And then Ken goes on to say, throughout A Course in Miracles, we are not only taught that the body and its world are illusions, but that they serve a strategic purpose in the ego's thought system of separation, diverting our attention from the mind's decision for guilt, thereby preventing us from ever changing our minds. The more compelling the form of the error, extreme pain or pleasure, sin or holiness, the more attractive its role as a defense. You know, I was thinking about this today because I was thinking about how sometimes it almost is like relief to lose it. I remember having a discussion with Susan about this, about how sometimes I would be having arguments with my daughter, and I felt like she was pushing me to react, you know, as much as I would keep calm, but I was doing this alone. I was telling myself I should be a calm mom, I should calm down. But it felt like she was deliberately pushing me to get me to break. And then if I did lose my temper, if I did cross that line in the sand, it was almost like both of us felt a little bit of relief for a second. Like we are, you know, like proving the ego right. There was a little bit of ego relief in that, and it's transient, right? It's transient when it comes from the ego. And I remember just feeling like, you know, that because that relief is so brief, and because it's relief of the ego, of course, what's the next thing that sets in? Guilt. And so I remember that thick feeling of guilt coming after that, you know, that attractive defense had been substantiated. And it's horrible. It does not feel good. It's like, you know, you build, and then you break, and then there's relief, but then it's like underneath that the guilt sets in. And so then is the time to now look at this anew and to really practice forgiveness again. And you know, that you're not upset for the reason that you think you could see peace instead of this, and that you're not alone in looking, and that you have this, again, this teacher of infinite kindness within that is willing to look with you and knows that everything is done already, that you've never left God, and that all of this is just a nightmare. And you know, that begins to settle in your mind instead. And you know, again, the more we do that, the shorter those times are, and the more habitual it becomes to turn to Jesus, to turn to the Holy Spirit instead of losing it, you know. And then even when you lose it, you shorten that time to come back and forgive yourself. So again, if anyone has anything to share from last week, please feel free to type in or to join me in the room here, and we can discuss it. Okay, and I'll keep reading because this part is I found this fascinating. Okay, so where I left off was, the more compelling the form of the error, extreme pain or pleasure, sin or holiness, the more attractive its role as a defense. On the other hand, when the form is looked at through Jesus' gentle eyes of love, it has no power to conceal the mind's content, the original and only mistake of choosing the ego's abusive thought system of separation over the Holy Spirit's healing thought system of atonement. So the thought system of separation, kill or be killed, and the Holy Spirit's healing thought system of atonement, together or not at all. And Bruce added a little comment here, shortening the gap, that's progress. And it is. You know, I think I remember talking about this at the Miracle Share virtual conference that we had back in October, you know, because Ken often would get asked, you know, how do I know if I'm making progress? And maybe it was you, it might have been you, Bruce, that we discussed this. I don't remember if it was you or Susan. But Ken would always say, you look at how you feel. How are you feeling? And it's a good indicator. You know, I think Course in Miracles has taught me many things, but the importance of being honest with myself and the importance of being honest with the Holy Spirit about how I feel. That you would have no thoughts of separation that you would keep, right? You bring it all to the Holy Spirit, and it's frightening. And you don't realize how frightening it is until you really try and practice doing it, and you really commit to looking at these thoughts of separation, all those thoughts that bring you pain, that make you feel separate, that make you feel guilty. Bruce is saying upset in any form is a surefire ego tilt indicator. Yes. Yeah, for sure. Especially when it's that righteous upset, right? That you have reason to feel the way that you feel, and you want to just go and tell people what happened because you want confirmation that what you feel is you're okay in feeling what you're feeling, upset, and I can't remember what I was saying before. Something about how the time period's shortened, but I don't remember. Anyways, I'm sure that I finished my thought. But I think it was about being honest with yourself. And Bruce says, "Who wants the validation?" Yeah, I know. It's so fleeting, like everything is in this world of form, with looking with ego. Everything's so fleeting. And what I come to realize is that that sort of subtle but constant, gentle love of the Holy Spirit is so much nicer. It's I'd be, as opposed to being so invested in the ego story and caught up in the drama. I watch myself now. So it's not as much as me being in it as much as I'm watching myself being in it. So it's like I'm pulling a bit away above the battlefield, right? And that's been helpful. That's been incredibly knowing I have a choice, right? Comes back to the forgiveness steps that we were talking about earlier. That third step, choosing with the Holy Spirit, knowing you have a choice, not feeling so out of control, that there could be a different way of seeing this, that you're not upset for the reason that you think, and it's interesting because when it comes to my kids, they're such a part of my life, my daily life. They both live at home. They see their dad a couple nights a week. Other than that, they're home with me, and I'm their primary caregiver, taking care of their needs. And so they're in my face, and they know exactly how to push my button. So it is a continual classroom, and they are absolutely hands down my best teachers. That's something actually that I wanted to talk about as well. Just that they seem, I read somewhere on Facebook, someone had posted that this whole idea that that the person in front of you is your mirror is bullshit. He said that it's your reaction to the person in front of you, that is your mirror. And I thought, how profound is that? So it's not, I don't need to feel guilty about what my kids are doing. That's not my mirror. My reaction is my mirror. That changed everything for me. Margaret saying, the choice and knowing that there are other ways to look at things. It even changed my children's responses to me and their situations to each other, right? One mind. So it's just, the shift doesn't just happen for you, it happens out, it happens for them as well. And the point is, not to be invested in what that's going to look like. So, it's not like, oh, I did all this forgiveness work, now instantly my kids are going to be amazing. You have no idea. You have no idea what it's going to look like. But trusting that continuing to do this work undoes the ego, leads you to a greater sense of peace, leads you back home to the love of God. That's what we trust in. That's what keeps us going. Bruce is saying, if we're afraid of unchanging acceptance, we have to scrounge for meager substitutes, and that is quite frustrating. We model those substitution strategies on our familiar patterns. Yes, absolutely. And it's this. This kind of goes back to the holy relationship and how it's a shabby substitute for God's love, even though it doesn't seem like it. And Lord knows, movies would tell you very differently. That you instantly should fall in love with your children, and it should be this amazing, rewarding, loving experience. And when it's not, something's gone wrong. It's just, that's the world talking. This is a relationship just like any other relationship. It's just that in this sense, there's so much more to learn, potentially, because usually it's a relationship that lasts a lifetime, and it is in your daily life, especially when your children are young. So in that sense, yes, they're cute and they look like you and all of that stuff, but they also bring up a lot of shit, and they're very good at it. Bruce is saying, good distinction. It's what I feed into the situation, not what appears to be fed back to me. So that's going back to the distinction that our reaction is our mirror, and not necessarily the person in front of us. Because again, we have no control. And I just want to reiterate that that overriding message again. I am not responsible for my child or parent's choices. I am responsible for my reactions and which teacher I choose to look at them with right now. Margaret says, "Ha! I wish that was the case." I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Oh, that it's always loving and amazing. Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? But yeah, then we wouldn't learn. So I think it's Ken Wapnick. It was Ken Wapnick who said something along the lines of, I don't want to mess it up too bad, but something along the lines of, this course is for people who don't think that this world is amazing and beautiful, and usually what brings you to A Course in Miracles is that you're looking for a better way. That the way that you're working, the way that you are the way your life is going isn't working, and that you are looking for a different way of seeing things, because the way that you're seeing things with ego is it hurts and it's painful. So unfortunately, pain is often what brings us to the course, but it's a great motivator, and it helps us. It helps. It's the fuel that can get us to see with the Holy Spirit as opposed to the ego. So again, I would like to invite anyone who would like to share live to join the room, and you can talk live here with me, or just keep writing in the chat, and we can keep that discussion going that way. Katie says, yeah, the world tells me that I brought the children into the world and I am responsible for them now. And listen, we're responsible for their daily needs, making sure that that they're clothed, that they're fed, that they're going to school and all of that stuff, but we're not responsible for the choices that they make. And I think that that's an incredible shift if you can get there. I'm finding personally that with my kids and my boyfriend, we all live together, as I said, and my boyfriend and I are very different parents. We have very different parenting styles and discipline styles, and it's been interesting, and you know, it's something that I feel is going to take a little bit longer to shift, that slow burn forgiveness perhaps, because I don't know what to do about it. I know that I get defensive of my kids, and I know that I probably see him as attacking before I see anything else. So it's something that I'm continually having to bring to the Holy Spirit to see differently, because um, I feel right now, and I know that this will shift, and I'm absolutely willing to keep bringing it to the Holy Spirit, but I feel um, in the middle, and I feel like I have to defend my kids, and that defending him to my kids feels wrong. Ooh, got some work to do. Um, so Bruce says, if we're happily sedated by ego's lies, we won't be motivated to go beyond them. Oh, that's like perfectly said. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Yeah, it is like a sedation, right? To buy into all of that, there's something better beyond that. Evelyn's saying, but when dealing with teenagers, it's so different because their attitude seems to be our responsibility. Seems that I didn't raise them up properly. Right, their attitude. Yeah, I think that that's something that you can go to the Holy Spirit with, that belief right there, that their attitude is your responsibility because you didn't raise them properly. There's guilt in that, that you didn't do something that you should have done, and I feel like there's a way to see that differently. That can't be true. I feel like that there's work there, Evelyn, for you to do with the Holy Spirit. There's a lot of opportunity there for you to shift that, because there's a couple things going on there, right? You're seeing that their attitude must be wrong, and also because it's wrong or bad, or I'm not sure if it's mean-spirited or what, but that you're responsible for it, even though it's based on a choice that they themselves are making. So this is now a time where you can take that power back, because this statement feels a bit powerless. You can take that power back and recognize that you can see this differently, that you can choose again. So it's possible that you're not responsible. It's possible that you have raised them properly to the best of your ability. And it's possible that their attitude is a neutral thing. But this is ripe with potential for forgiveness. So you could absolutely take that to the Holy Spirit and see how you feel afterwards, about the possibility that you could be wrong about this. Wouldn't that be amazing if it wasn't your responsibility? Bruce is saying, we've taken lifetimes to develop our special relationship skills. Why not be patient with ourselves, undoing and reversing that learning? I love that. I love that so much. I'm going to mention just, not everyone believes in past lives, right? And that's totally cool. But I'll just share a quick story. My daughter, who's 10, when she was about 4 years old, she was just sitting there playing with blocks, and just totally in her little kid world, just worried about building blocks. And I was reading like a Hay House book on reincarnation or something, and I just, for whatever reason, just decided to ask her, well, have you ever been big before? And she went into this whole past life thing that, oh yeah, my name was Elise and you were my mommy, and or no, you were my daughter, and Daddy was my husband, and she remembered my name and details from it, and it just came out of her like it was nothing. It was so fascinating, but it makes so much sense to me, our dynamic, that she would have been my mother in a previous life. Makes sense to me. Bruce is saying, I just realized from Evelyn's comment, so Evelyn is the one who said it's so different with teenagers because their attitude seems to be our responsibility. Bruce is saying, I just realized from Evelyn's comment that we all have authority problem issues around anything or anyone we feel responsible for, anyone or anything else, which is an echo of our belief that we usurped creation. Yeah, that's a good one. That we somehow were able to overthrow God, kill God, and create these separate selves. That's what the tiny nut idea is based on. And if we're not living up to the authority, then we're bad and we're going to be punished. And that's ultimately what we're afraid of with God, that He's going to come back and get us. That's a teaching of the Course. So that's bang on. That's great. Great insight, Bruce. Margaret is saying we have a tendency to do that when our children are not listening to us, remembering that we are teaching them these skills, but they are flexing their preteen muscles. Sure. The whole. I don't have teenagers. My daughter is definitely starting to show signs of asserting herself and challenging authority and things like that. But I've gotten to the point where I can't look at her behavior in this big way. I have to take it day to day and situation to situation. Otherwise, I get kind of wrapped up in the story, if that makes any sense. But it's helpful for me to also, that whole line, or that line from the lesson, from the workbook, I see only the past. My tendency before was to really, and I know I'm kind of picking on my daughter tonight, and both my kids trigger me, but my daughter and I definitely have this back and forth that is very loud and in my face. But when I would try and analyze her behavior in this big way, I would get to the point where I would see only the past. And with her, I would base and we do this unconsciously all the time. So this is something that I'm trying to consciously undo. I would base everything on stuff that she'd done before and just assume that she'd do it again. So I wouldn't try things with her because I would imagine that she would just do the same thing that she did before. But bringing that belief to the Holy Spirit is incredible, because I'm able to sort of see her just in each situation instead of the story that I tell myself about her. Bruce is saying just the past lives within this alleged lifetime are enough. Yes, very true. And Margaret's saying even my 8-year-old does this, and I'm guessing you mean flexing the preteen muscles. It's certainly, this is another thing that has come up for me quite a bit. This idea that children should do what we say all the time, and that when they don't, that's a problem. If they're not behaving to my standards, that they should be punished. And this is something that I'm coming to sort of question. I think I mentioned it a bit last week, just that every situation seems to be different. As much as it would be really easy for there to be like behavior punishment. Life doesn't seem to flow that way, and it has not been effective for me to parent that way. And it's taken a lot of work with the Holy Spirit, to trust myself and to trust my inner teacher that in each situation, when there appears to be conflict, that by going to him, by turning to him, the most loving outcome is what will unfold every time. Trusting that. No matter what I'm hearing outside of myself, no matter what, that ego voice within is saying, but trusting. And there, I would say that there is a greater knowing within me. When I've done that enough times, there's a greater knowing within me that's louder than those voices that I know. And sometimes even that knowing, that greater knowing, isn't enough, and I'll kind of spin out and buy into the ego stuff and do go against that inner voice. But it's still there. It's like it's just constantly whispering to me, that this is the most loving outcome. This is the most loving outcome. This is what's right. This is what's best for all. But so sometimes I do have to reel it back in and go back to the Holy Spirit, because I forget. As Susan was saying last week, I become afraid of love again. So even, hearing that and knowing that, I become afraid of love again enough to really see it through. But we get to choose again. We always get to choose again. Bruce is saying, expectations, arming ego's nuclear family warheads. This is great. Yes, expectations of behavior, expectations of ourselves as parents. And I'll speak to just briefly about expectations as a single mother. Before my marriage ended, that was my biggest fear. Isn't that interesting? Honestly, it was my biggest fear. Being a single mom, I remember seeing other, we lived in a neighborhood of like townhouses, kind of a commuter sort of, like everyone commuted from where we lived, because there was nothing really around us but this neighborhood of townhouses. And there was a couple women in that neighborhood who were single moms. And I remember looking at them and just having this overriding judgment of how difficult their lives must be without having a partner, without having the father in the picture. And that was my worst fear, because there was no way I could handle 2 kids on my own. And there was no way I could do this on my own. And carrying that fear with me. And I think it's interesting that I've noticed this in my life a lot, that something like that I carry manifests, and it did. And it's been interesting, because I have absolutely handled it, because I'm not alone. I'm not alone just because the father's out of the picture for me in this household. He's not of my children's lives at all. But not living with me, doing this seemingly on my own, but I'm not alone. I have that inner teacher, and I always did. And coming around to that and being not just comforted by it, but guided by it, has been life-changing. It's the way that I handle this with sanity. It's the way that I handle this, and I'm still able to be loving. Not all the time. I drop the ball all the time, but I am able to let go of the fear and live with the love instead. I'm able to. I see it completely differently. I don't see it as being by myself. Now, there are times when things get really heated where I'm like, cursing my ex-husband that I have to do this alone, and then I remember that I'm not alone, and that there is a different way to see it, and it's honestly, it's the way to get through. This is for me. This is the way back home. And knowing that I'm not alone. We talked about a little bit last week about our relationship with the Holy Spirit, and making it the most important thing. And it really is, especially when it comes to parenting, because as everyone says, it is the most difficult job out there, and Ken Wapnick says in his book, it's our most difficult classroom. So it's incredibly important doing this work to recognize that you cannot do this alone. And I'm actually going to be reading from Susan's notes here because they're really helpful. So she talks about how as long as we think we're a body, we need an ego-free presence outside of the dream. And Susan even talked last week about envisioning yourself holding Jesus's hand. So whatever works for you, you know, I think Jesus for a lot of people is a symbol of infinite compassion. And so imagining holding on to his hand, and imagine a teacher of infinite compassion who will always understand, always be in that calm state, and always able to offer love and extend love and be a model of that love. Imagine him holding your hand and taking you through this. I mean, how can you feel alone? How can you feel alone? Envisioning that and knowing that and trusting in that. It's incredibly comforting. She says we must look at how much we want to be right and make Jesus wrong. And this again comes back to what I was talking about at the very beginning, and feeling justified in our anger, justified in our upset, right? And wanting to tweet it out and text our friends and get, this is what happened, and can you believe it? And we have to be willing to let go of that in order to see it through Jesus' eyes, in order to let that the love come over us instead of staying in the fear, because it feels awful. And again, that feeling of justification, you know, when someone agrees with you and like, oh my gosh, he's such a jerk, that it's so transient. It goes so quickly, and then you end up looking for it again and again and again. And this life offers you countless opportunities to do that, to be justified in your anger. And it's up and it's down, and you're on both sides, you know, equally of being the victor and the victim. And when you get sick of that, and Jesus knows you will, then you really do turn to him instead. You know that again, that's the fuel. Instead of choosing for the ego, we choose for the better way. We choose for love. I'm just going to read some of Susan's notes again. We must step back and let him lead the way. So again, this is an important distinction. I remember Ken talking about this quite a bit. But this is not about bringing Jesus into the dream. This is not about bringing Jesus into your kitchen with your kids and making sure that they're doing their chores and all of that stuff. This is about bringing the dream to Jesus, or bringing the mistaken thought of separation, bringing that to Jesus. Your willingness to see this differently to Jesus, and then he takes care of the rest. But we must be willing to take that step back, right? I'm not upset for the reason I think. It's possible that I'm not upset for the reason I think. That's the stepping back, right? And then I could see peace instead of this. Is that like offering it to the Holy Spirit? And then remembering you're not alone, that he will take care of this for you, that this can be undone. That's the process. And again, it's incredibly important to recognize that you're accepting his will, not yours. Letting go of the expectations, trusting in what the Holy Spirit, what will come out of this, and trusting that it is the most loving thing, and that it continues, that you will be offered more and more and more opportunities to choose this again. Okay, and back to Susan's notes. That we will confront our repressed resistance and fear. Yes. Yes, we will. And that will come up in different forms, and the form doesn't matter. You know, you don't have to be a parent to get anything out of this book. I mean, ultimately, this book is about special relationships, and that's a perfect stage for your repressed fear, guilt, resistance, not wanting to take this to the Holy Spirit, not wanting to let things go. I've many personal examples of that, things that I wanted to keep that I did not want to let go for fear of losing them. But you can't lose anything here. You can't lose anything here. It's all God when seen correctly. We're God. We are everything that we imagine. Everything that we love is of God. It's not. It doesn't go anywhere really. But in the dream, there will appear to be loss, but ultimately, we're not losing anything, and that's something that we come to understand more and more as we develop that trust with the Holy Spirit. The just as an aside, that part of the course is incredibly helpful to me. It's in the Manual for Teachers, the Development of Trust. It's incredibly comforting, and a lot of times we as students want to know where we are in all of this, and we can learn quite a bit by reading the Development of Trust. Bruce has a little comment. He says, well stated, we have to be willing to ask for help in undoing our level of confusion by asking for help in changing how we see things, not in changing the things. And as a beginner student, this was something that I really had issues with, because I just felt like I must know what is best. Of course I know what's best, and what I'm seeing out here is not what's best. So you need to fix this, Jesus. It's not about that. It's about recognizing that what appears to be happening is making me upset, and that I'm not upset for the reason I think, and that there's another way to see this. I can see peace instead of it. And it's one of the lessons. I do not have my own best. I do not know my own best interests. Something along those lines. I do not perceive my own best interests. I think, and it's one of the earlier lessons. That was a tough one to take on. We really do think we know what's best. We think we know what should happen in our lives, who should be in our lives, and what those people should do for us. We think we know all of it, and this course really strips all of that away when we become willing to do that. And like I said, we don't lose anything; we gain everything. And it's okay to be resistant, because this is no small thing that we're doing here. This is undoing a lot of fear, a lot of bullshit that the ego has fed. It's okay to be resistant to it. And one of the greatest antidotes to this is laughter. I remember going through about a year ago or so, a tough time with my daughter. She didn't like her teacher and her class, and there was all these, what she called girl drama. And it was really difficult, and she was acting out a lot. And, I have a really good friend who's also a course student, who encouraged me to, again, to do my forgiveness work and all of that, and be willing to not teach in the moment. Be willing to let the moment be, to be what it is. So, whatever my daughter needed to let out at the time, to allow her to do that, and for me to establish loving boundaries at the time. I'm not going to let her hurt herself or anything like that, or hurt anyone else, but to let her do that, and then to later on make a conscious effort to joke about what had happened. Wasn't it funny when you said blah 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 to mommy? Or, as long, obviously we're not going to make light of disrespect, but sometimes they say silly things when they're upset, right? And to see if we could laugh about that together. And it's literally laughing away the ego, making it silly. And that's a really great tool for diminishing its importance. You know, even though it seems to be important, it seems to be everything. It's ultimately it's nothing. And what better way to make that true than to laugh about it, right? So that was a wonderful tip that I have taken to heart and have used a few times, and it's been incredibly helpful. Thank you so much for everyone joining me tonight. I hope next time that we can try and get people in the room, but the chat's working well too. So, and I'm open. You know, it's all good the way that it's happening. So next week we're going to be focusing on the second part of Ken's book, and so that is being adult children, and dealing with your parents. And I would really love to hear from anyone who has aging parents, maybe even in a caretaking role. But whatever gets brought to the table is wonderful. My parents are, you know, retired in Florida and healthy as horses and all of that. And I don't see them often enough, perhaps, to have issues there, but there's certainly things that I've worked out and worked through as an adult that I can absolutely share with you all, and I will. And Susan will be back next week. And Margaret, the name of the book again is Parents and Children: Our Most Difficult Classroom, and the author is Ken Wapnick. And I will put in the chat, I'll put a link to the book, so you guys can get that. So I'm just getting that right now. You can buy it directly from the Foundation for A Course in Miracles. So you can get it that way. Here. So there it is. Okay, so it's 2 parts, and you can, like I said, you can get it in audio or in book form. And next week Susan will be joining us, and I know she has definite forgiveness opportunities that go on in her life with her aging parents, so we can talk about that. And anything you guys bring to the table, I look forward to discussing it and hearing together. So thanks so much for joining me. Sorry about the sound problem at the beginning, and hopefully I get my headset next week and we're all good sound-wise and there's none of that anymore. All right? Thanks again, guys. We'll see you next week.